Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah for attending. Allah reward you for coming from quite far. Inshallah, I pray you find it beneficial. Inshallah, you get a lot out of the session. So as you know, this is the first in the series of workshops we're looking to have. And it's aimed at giving Muslims conviction and confidence in the deen, so we can ourselves be sort of confident that we can, inshallah, defend the deen of Islam within ourselves and spread it to others, inshallah. No. So we live in a time where Islam's ever more in the spotlight, ever more in the news, and it seems we are questioned on every level, whether that be our belief in the Creator, to the very fabric of Islam itself, the specific aspects of Islam like woman or Sharia. These are issues that we're questioned on a regular basis. So it's according to these things that our workshops are designed to address, designed to give us the tools to address these specific issues. So inshallah, this is the first session. We plan to hold it every 2 weeks from today, around the same time in the same location, inshallah. Just to go over the topics we're going to go through. It's the first topic obviously is proof of God. Inshallah, the next one will be proof of Quran. The third one will be women in Islam and controversial topics. A lot of the difficult questions sometimes non-Muslims or people we can come across in the media. The fourth one will be the issue of punishment, the Sharia system and the punishment in Islam, and the issue of violence. Muslims are commonly portrayed as being violent people, intolerable. So we look to discuss how we can address these issues. The last topic, inshallah, will be Islam's unique solutions for mankind. So inshallah, it's quite comprehensive. It covers a lot of different issues, and inshallah, it'll be a busy 2 months. Inshallah, we hope you can attend each one. It will lead up to just before Ramadan starts. So inshallah, we should be all finished up by then. Before I pass it on to Brother Jamal, I just wanted to just sort of explain the format. As we said on the fly, it's an interactive format, so it's a chance for you to ask questions and difficult questions that you might have come across and different arguments. So it will be interactive, so it'll be a good chance for us to come up with, to discuss, because this way it's much better to establish the issues within yourself, rather if it was just a lecture format. So inshallah, we'll break at around 4:30ish for some light refreshments, inshallah, just to break it up because it's quite a long time, a few hours. So, and then we'll break, and inshallah, after that we'll continue up until around 6, inshallah. So before we start, if you don't mind, if we could just probably go around the room, if you could just say what your name is, where you're from, and inshallah what you hope to get from this session. So if you don't mind starting with yourself.
I'm Newman from Camberley. It's basically, I think it started from work, I guess. I had one non-Muslim just asking me.
My name's Jamal. I'm also kind of just coming to just get knowledge and just see if I can get anything out of it, really. Inshallah.
Babar Khan. To my friends and the other non-Muslims, Muhammad Khan. So just get some knowledge extra, so you can answer something better than increase your knowledge. So when a non-Muslim asks you questions, so you can give them a better kind of answer than it's just knowledge, increasing your knowledge.
Inshallah, I hope you can meet your expectations today, inshallah. So I guess we'll make a start. So I'll pass it over to Brother Jamal.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's very good, first of all, I'll say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man taba'ahu bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin. I begin in the name of Allah, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and I bear witness as none worthy of worship except He subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I bear witness that His last and final messenger is Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. As you're aware, obviously, I think most of you, all of you attended the launch event we did a few weeks ago, in which we presented what the KnowMuhammad campaign was about. We had an event here, obviously around 70 people attending, which was just to give awareness of what we want to do with this campaign. And we will have similar sessions as are happening here, as have happened up and down the country, with this campaign in mind, which is really about us as Muslims activating ourselves, empowering ourselves, gaining the strength and ability and understanding, inshallah, as much as we can, to be able to interact with the wider society on a firmer footing in terms of our understanding of Islam, our understanding how to tackle some of the issues and the discussions that come up that at times leave us a bit baffled or a bit confused how best to respond. Because as we see, there are a lot of negative messages people are hearing, and really it's changed the atmosphere and environment between Muslims and non-Muslims in this country. So we as Muslims, we see that there's some level of a threat from this, but there's also opportunity. Because the fact that people are talking, they're asking questions about Islam, is still an opportunity for us to present our deen, inshallah. And if we have that confidence, we present in the right way, hopefully we can guide people to Islam as well. And for ourselves, as Yahya mentioned, it's important for us to feel that level of confidence in our deen, that we don't feel there are gaps or there are weaknesses that we have to feel ashamed of within Islam or feel embarrassed about. And for that reason, we want to help prepare our community to be on the strongest footing possible, on her deen and on her Islam with a sound awareness, and also we can reach out and grow this ummah through our interaction with the wider society. So those are the kind of key aims of the workshops that we're holding, the sessions that we will be running. So today's topic, as Brother Yahya introduced, will be on the topic of proof of a creator, i.e. proof of Allah's existence, and how we as Muslims should encounter and deal with this argument. We know there are many people in this society who are atheists, so they don't believe in a creator altogether. There are many people who are what they would call agnostic. So they say they haven't made their mind up on the issue, or they feel that the evidence is 50-50, they're not really sure about the issue. So with such an atmosphere and much mockery as well of religion in general and Islam, people think religion is something not really to go towards, and it's not given a respected position in a general sense, and obviously Islam is included within that picture. So we as Muslims, we need to be people who can engage with the society, and we need to be able to engage with the challenges of these particular sets of views. Perhaps in the past, a lot of the dawah efforts of Muslims was focused on dealing with Christianity and what the beliefs of the Christians are, what their views are, and the like, looking at the Bible and so on. Nowadays, we see the society has moved very far away from Christianity, to the extent most of the people are not even familiar with its basic beliefs. So if you talk to someone about what the Bible says, he himself maybe has never even read the Bible, so it's not a relevant point of discussion for many people. So we have to understand the challenges of this environment, understand the thinking and the approach we need to take so we can engage with the non-Muslims in the right way. Before we get into that discussion, what we'll do, as Brother Yahya mentioned, we want to kind of make it into a bit of a more informal session and more discussion amongst ourselves, rather than simply us presenting and giving a lecture. So if I could ask, what we wanted to do is kind of go into small groups and then come back to one group, particularly because we've got 8 brothers here in the audience. I think Brother Abdul will join in at some point as well. So what I could ask to do is we could split into 2 groups. The first question I want to deal with, in fact I'll just explain the first question I want to deal with. First of all, is about ourselves as a community. Why do we as Muslims believe most of our community have come to Islam or believe in Islam? That's the first question I want to ask. The next follow-on questions will be some of the common questions that non-Muslims may ask us. I want us to try and come up with answers within the group, and then we'll come back and feedback together. And then we'll look at how we will try to take on the argument and show that there is a creator. And based on the first 2 questions I'm going to ask, I think that will give us some idea of how we want to tackle this question. So I hope that's clear. But what I'll ask to do, maybe if I can ask Brother at the back, sorry, it was Mudassar.
Yeah.
Maybe if I can ask you to come over to this side. So we've got 2 groups of 4 first of all. I think I can do is just 4-4. So it's evenly matched teams. So team A over here, team B. If I could just, and obviously you can rearrange the chair so you can sit together as possible. The first question I want us to ask is to think about, within our community, what are the reasons people within our community have actually come to Islam or are following Islam. So if we can think about some of the issues, obviously I'm sure you can think of living in a community, living amongst your, from your parents, or all of these things are reasons why we are Muslim. Obviously we know we should have conviction, we should have understanding, but we know that's what we should do. But what we should and what we actually do, sometimes there's a big distance between the two. So if I could ask you in your smaller groups, just for 5 minutes or so, just to look at the issues in your community, why you think the average Muslim has come to Islam or follows Islam, and we'll come back after you've had that discussion for a few minutes to take feedback from both sets of teams. So, is that okay for everybody? Any questions before we get into the exercise?
The most biggest reason, well, the most likely reason that we start off as Muslims is because it's inherited, like from our parents, and
born Muslim.
Yeah, born Muslim.
Born in a Muslim family, then.
Also, say if you get married to someone who's a Muslim, that's another one.
Right. If you carry on reading, I won't go over them.
A Muslim person gets married to a non-Muslim, and then non-Muslim becomes Muslim. This is how.
Just to fit in, basically.
Yes,
yeah?
yes.
Okay.
There's also money.
Could be one of them. Money is influence, maybe.
Money
Some people may become Muslim because of money.
Goes two ways.
Gives them oil.
Good oil.
Well, you know when a rich sheikh comes and says, look, I've got so much money.
There's also like when someone becomes ill or has a near-death experience, sometimes they reevaluate their life.
Right.
And at times of disasters, people.
Let's say a life-changing experience.
Yes.
Life-changing experience. Sorry, please carry on.
There's Dawa, like people handing out the Quran.
Yeah.
Looking at good examples, having friends who are good examples, like when people just evaluate their life. Some people have dreams, like, say they have a dream, like they're there on Judgment Day and they just think about reevaluating their life. There was Azan.
Azan. Some people listen to the Adhan, they become Muslim.
Okay.
Yeah. They hear the first
Spiritual, you mean spiritual?
Yeah.
Spiritual
effect.
Let's say, yeah.
Spiritual effect.
Yeah.
Well, I'll put Azan, I know it.
Yes.
And there was also wars.
Yes.
Wars.
Yes. Well, example is fighting. Like an example of a disaster. The 9/11.
Yeah.
It's like a war, isn't it? If people hear of this, people are causing trouble, and then they go try to read the Quran and see what is it, and they become Muslim too.
So that
Okay.
that also goes
Yeah.
to a point where Muslims became a ruling figure.
Yeah.
They when now we are in power. So hence all the other, they're not directly you have to become Muslim, but because of the influence of the
This is a historical thing you're talking about, where historically Muslims ruled.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it could,
And
I
another
don't know, it
is-
could be in the future.
And in future, inshallah, to
Yeah.
some degree,
Even-
because obviously this is
Yeah, but that's not the way we want to go.
Yeah.
Even in the time of the Mughal, there were wars, and then they fought the wars, they pushed the Muslim away, and then they became Muslim when they saw how Muslims were living.
Yeah.
So wars is one of the reasons.
I see. Okay, I'll put that down. But
It's
obviously,
debatable, yeah.
it's debatable. But obviously, the question is, one of the points is from our community,
Oh, also.
because a lot of these reasons, they're good reasons,
Yes.
but some of them are from people who've come to Islam,
Yes.
not being brought up in the community, and they've made their own investigation.
Yes.
When we look at our own community, a lot of these things don't really apply, isn't it, from people within the Muslim community?
True.
Community or Muslim.
Yes.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was- I think one of the things which I probably misunderstood, you're saying why average Muslim come into Islam,
Yeah.
which is why Muslim become more Muslim, you know what I mean?
Right.
Go
I
to
see.
Islam. So
Okay.
I kind of, that's one understanding, but majority of us thinking why are community Muslim? We didn't jot down so many, we jot down only 2 or 3, which Baba would like to read it.
Well, first one was the inheritance that we are
Yeah.
born into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cover it.
The main reason we said we were Muslims is because we believe it's the truth,
Mm.
and that's the main reason for being Muslim.
Yeah.
There's
But
sense of
it was kind of really kind of the main thing that brings us as, you know, I don't know, the 4 of us,
Yeah.
if there was any reverts between us, we could have said, oh, you know, something he heard
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
came. But because we're just talking on you know, as
Yeah.
we are, our parents were Muslims,
Yeah.
we came to this life, oh, you're Muslim, go to the mosque, we'll do this.
Mhm.
Until you're kind of into the age of 14, 15, you start then thinking, is this the right religion? Am I? Then you start comparing religions, and you just think, you know, Christianity, what's wrong with it? What's wrong with Judaism? You know, and then you just think, okay, my religion is the best and is the right one, and I'll just increase my knowledge in it. So
I see.
it's but when you start when you're born, you're kind of born as a Muslim, and then which is the inheritance one.
My experience was, I'm born and brought up in Pakistan, Muslim life there.
Yeah.
So practicing of Islam is more like a tradition.
Tradition.
So when I come here, I realized something missing in me. And it's when I was looking for peace, obviously hang around and everything, I said, let's go back to your root. And then I found the real taste, or you may say a value. What's the value behind in Islam?
That's right.
So I found the real Islam here in the West, rather than back in home.
I see.
That's what my understanding is.
Right.
I think, so...
The beginning, you know, why?
Yeah.
What's the reason?
What is the reason that gives us that strong belief? This is the question. Now, the reason why I asked this question, I think it's very important too, how we engage with other people. Because I would say most people in our community, unfortunately, they'll fall into this category here. That the basis for their Islam is pretty much inheritance. It's what their family have brought them into. Maybe there's not the understanding there, but it's the tradition of the family. Yeah? So that's the main reason, I would say, for most of our community, unfortunately. There are lots of good examples here for the reverts. I think a lot of your examples were looking at people who've come into Islam. And I did a kind of trick question at the beginning, because really, all of us should have come into Islam.
Yeah.
Even if you're from a Muslim family, you should have come into Islam, you should have embraced Islam, because why? You have made the conscious decision to follow Islam, to be a Muslim. You don't treat it like your skin colour, or your height, or your weight. Some of these things, they come from, we inherited it from our parents. We didn't have any choice, isn't it? Yeah? But our Islam is not something we inherit. So we all should have reverted to Islam. We all should have made the choice to come into Islam consciously, with awareness, with understanding. However, many of us, we have got this issue. We're coming to Islam because it's what our parents taught us. Sometimes we have questions, they didn't get answered. We kind of try to avoid dealing or thinking about those issues. We have some confusion about Islam, and it stems from what? Because we took Islam on inheritance rather than our own thinking. And that causes some problems. I think this is a very important point, actually. This issue of life-changing experiences and dreams. These are things that motivate us. When someone passes away in our family, or some other event happens, you'll find someone who's not practicing, who will start to practice his deen more, or look into his deen more. However, what may also happen is that with time passing away, sometimes that emotion and that awareness that you have when you or you face the musibatul maut, when you face the pain of someone passing away, it makes you think of Allah, it makes you think of akhirah. What happens when you're back to your normal life, job, business? You start to not be as conscious. You see sometimes people who go to Hajj, they go to Umrah, they come back very strong because they went, had a very good experience, then get back into work, and then slowly things get back to normal. So we want to have the strong iman, the strong understanding, which means that whatever experience we're in, we will stay firm on the deen. If we look at the issue of the community, obviously it's very important. You're in a strong community, Muslims around you, we find people practicing, then they go into another community, maybe they move for study or work, they're not around the same circle of friends, the parents, the environment, they start to feel weaker in their Islam. You see, so these are all factors that are not strengthening us as a community to carry Islam to other people. Yeah, so these are the dangers of this inheritance, that we can't present Islam. I don't know if there are any other thoughts you have about these dangers of not being able to carry Islam aside from inheritance. Any other suggestions brothers have?
The problem I've had with the inheriting Islam rather than finding Islam itself, I mean, most of us in this room, I mean, we've been quite fortunate because we've had Muslim parents and we've had some form of Islamic upbringing, I mean, apart from the brothers we were here.
Yeah.
But as I said, like, people who find Islam, I mean, they tend to strengthen their Aqidah and their belief a lot more than the people who've just been given it to them on a silver plate. And the other problem is with inheriting Islam is that I find is that a lot of culture is mixed with Islamic values. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't want to step on toes. There's nothing wrong with culture, but if it starts to, say, for example, get in the way of like following Islam as a true way of life.
Contradiction between.
Yeah, if there's any kind of contradiction right there, then that could be a problem. Like there are certain things which could fall under like the scale of like which can take you out of the fold of Islam. Like some people will say like yeah, all religion is good, that's well and good, and they might have a pagan statue in their house as well as having the Quran. They might follow the teachings of Zen or something like this. So their idea of Islam is there, but it's a spiritual form, but it's also warped with other traditions and other cultures.
That's right.
There's nothing wrong with respecting other traditions and cultures, but I do believe that the two should not mix like oil and water.
That's right, excellent. Another point that's very important, I think this point about dreams that one of the brothers mentioned. Now, this can be taken in two ways. I think there's one thing that we have in our community. Sometimes people will say, I met a brother who said that he had a dream, before he came to Islam, he had a dream that he saw the Prophet ﷺ who was talking to him, but he was talking to him in Arabic, and he didn't understand Arabic. So he went away to study and learned Islam, and he came to the deen. Now, subhanAllah, I've never heard anyone since who's had that type of story, but that's not going to happen to everybody, isn't it? That situation. So if we're going to interact with people, we can't say to them, right, here's a book, read it, go to bed, and hope he dreams about the Prophet ﷺ. That's not really a good dawah technique for us, because it's not in the hands of anyone to determine such a thing. So this type of thing is very unusual, and sometimes it can be a bit dangerous as well. And an example I will give is sometimes you'll find Muslims will say, if you look at this tree, it's making sujood. Yeah, if you remember that we used to have, many masajid used to have this picture of the trees where they were in the shape of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. So we said, subhanAllah, look, these trees, the trees are giving da'wah now. Yeah? And sometimes you have people, they will say, look, I opened the tomato or I opened the cucumber and it says Allah, it says Muhammad. Yeah? Now these things, alhamdulillah, it's the creation of Allah. But sometimes you'll find other communities, they have similar claims.
That's true.
And if our basis for Islam is such things, it's quite dangerous. So for those of you a bit older, you may remember a few years ago when the Hindus, the statues, they started to drink milk. Do you remember this occasion?
They did.
So all around the world, mainly in India, the statues, they started to appear to people, let's say appear, to be drinking milk. So people were saying, look at this is the proof. This is the proof that our idols, they're very powerful because they can drink milk. Yeah, so many people, they started, and I know many Muslims, they went to the temples to see what was happening because they became confused. that why is it that we always said that this idol worship is not anything, but why is that these statues, they have the power to drink milk? You see? Now obviously, first question we should ask, should I worship something that gets thirsty and needs to drink? Is that something to be worshipped? That's the first question we should ask. Should that be something that is proof this is creator? Because it drinks. Because I drink milk. Yeah? So no one should worship me because I drink milk. It's nothing special. Yeah? Also, we know scientifically there is such a thing as capillary action. So if you look at the feet of the statue, you'll find all the milk that has been drawn off the surface of the milk has actually just run to the bottom of the statue. So that's why you saw they had the dishes, they were carrying these idols around in dishes, and so look, it's drinking milk. And then you see the milk is just at the bottom of the statue. It's just been carried along the surface of the object. You can do it with a toy, you can do it with any object actually, we see the same effect taking place. But my point is that many Muslims, I know people who went to temples to actually see what was happening there, because it was something they saw unusual. And this category, it means that we need to look at what is proof and what is not proof. If we don't understand how to prove something, then we will get confused in this way. Or we won't be able to convey our message. So we need to be clear in our minds what constitutes a proof and what is not a proof. I.e., what do we need to give forward in proving Islam to other people? And things like a tomato, or saying this cucumber has the name of Allah, while it's a nice sign for us. Just the same way when you see a nice beautiful sunset, that is a sign for us actually. When you see the full moon, it's a sign for us of creator, sign of creation. Yeah? So these things, they are all signs actually. We don't need just the name, we see the signs of the creator in these things. But I'm getting into the discussion a bit too much. So what I'll do, I'll ask you to go into a second exercise, second question now, which I hope will help us to actually tackle some of the issues that we would commonly address with non-Muslims. Yeah? So in the same set of groups, I think our brother Shaheen will join this group here as well, inshallah. What I'll ask you to tackle is a very common question. Maybe you won't always hear this from people, but I'll ask it nevertheless because it helps us build towards how to tackle these arguments in general. Often people will say, and this is for people who are what are called agnostics. Yeah? Now, agnostic is someone who says that the existence of God is something you don't really know, you can't really be sure about, and we don't know, I'm not sure. Yeah? So this is often a position. Some people are like, I don't say there's no God, but I don't really know, and is it really relevant as well? Is it relevant to how I live my life? So I'm going to give you a question that sometimes you'll find posed. I do a lot of events and activities on university campuses, so generally you'll find a lot more people will ask this type of question there as well, because they want to have more of a skeptical way of thinking as well. But people will often say, now, the way the universe is, the way the world is, how do we really know what's out there? How do we really know what is true, what is false? And, you know, the philosophers, they even ask the question, now, how do we know that we're not all living in a dream right now? How do I know I'm not in a dream? I think I'm here lecturing you, but I'm actually in East London where I live, I'm asleep in my bed, and I'm going to wake up, and oh, subhanAllah, I didn't actually do the session. Yeah? So many people will say, how can you really know whether, or how can you be sure about anything? Yeah? How can you be sure that there's a creator? How can you even be sure that we're even in this room at this moment in time? Because of the way the world is, sometimes you think you're sure about something, you find out it's not true. Yeah? Does everyone understand this question? Has anyone ever come across any type of question like this before?
More like a philosophical.
Yeah, this is a type of philosophical argument. How do we really know that we're really in this world? Yeah? So it may sound, it's a very silly question, I have to say, but the reason why I'm saying it is that we need to think about how to get people to get into the right track. So I'm giving you this example of how people will often take you in the wrong track in the discussion. So I want you to try and work together to get the discussion back on track. Inshallah. You want to ask a question quickly, Burhan?
I was thinking that, yeah, because of
Oh, sorry. What I'm going to say, sorry to cut you off, but what we're doing is trying to get the brothers to work in smaller groups first of all, so you can discuss amongst yourselves and we'll come back together. Inshallah. So you're out of the room when we discussed that earlier. So what I'll have to do is we've formed the same teams now. So obviously Brother Burhan will join you brothers here, inshallah, and Shaheen will join you brothers here. If we spend maybe 10 minutes on
So
that?
what's the question so we can write it? So
What's
Yeah.
the actual question?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the question
so
is,
what's the reason we're here?
yeah, no, what's the reason? How do we know that we are really here? If we can't be sure that we are here, how can we be sure about whether there is a creator or not? Yeah? I'll give you an example of this actually. A brother, he works out in the gym, and one of the gym owners, he was trying to talk to him about belief in a creator. The gym owner said, look, atoms, there's space between atoms. Most of the world is made up of space. There's nothing there. Yeah? So actually these weights, most of the weight is nothing. You understand? It's just, you know, the atomic structure is that there's powers which pull the electron, proton, and something. So if the world is made up of such a strange thing, how do we know what the world really is about? And if there are so many mysteries out there, we don't really know anything, why are we talking about creator? Yeah? Obviously the brother pointed out, you're making a lot of money from selling people weights that you think don't weigh anything and there isn't anything in them. So why you're doing that while you're working out in the gym every day? Very strange. But this type of idea is, if the world is so mysterious, if we know so little about it, how can we talk about something like a creator? Yeah, is that clear for everybody what the question is? I know it sounds very weird and it's not a very sensible question, but sometimes understanding how to tackle this type of thing helps you deal with other people who've got more normal, more reasonable discussions, inshallah. So if we can just maybe form in your little circles again.
Well, this isn't you can hear. So they've never seen each other, but they can contact through the wall. So, because for some form of creation to exist, there has to be a start. This is the whole point. This is why we need to get back to the creation. Like nothing. The thing is that God is basically his properties are made of. He's basically infinite being. He has no beginning.
You can't have something coming from nothing. And then you're saying that this is
How do you know that we are here?
How do we know that we are here?
Yeah.
So, to summarise the answers, obviously from a physical point, we can see each other.
Yeah.
You know, we can hurt each other, to extend on that. We can comfort each other if you want.
Right. I'll write these on the board actually. So you carry on. See each other, hurt each other, comfort each other.
Comfort each other. I mean, obviously, I'm just going from we know we are here from our basic discoveries, i.e. the world, all the places we've kind of been to. We know where we are in the world as opposed to other human beings in other places in the world. For example, we know where we are physically, United Kingdom, GU22, 8HF. I think we're supposed to.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
I mean,
the map thing is consensus among all,
yeah,
rather than any.
that's right.
So that's why we use the map thing. The GPS proved it, or science proved it. We all are here.
This is a common consensus that the world is round. We can get to A to B with certain instruments, for example, wherever the transportation is. So yeah.
Okay. Alright, I'll come back to this, but let me take this group and see let's see what the differences are in the answer, or maybe it's the same answer. But some differences.
We wrote senses, like in our dreams, our senses are basic level, but when we know we're here, our experience says that we are here. We have a deeper sense that we're here. We could taste, we could read. Our experience says that we are here from, what we have in our head. We are a human being. We are not in a dream. Awareness, and we analyze you look at the signs, like the Quran says, look at the signs again and again, and
Look at the signs or science?
signs, like
Signs.
signs in the life towards the Creator.
Right, I see.
So
Yeah.
if you're saying there's no creator because we're in a dream, who created the person that's actually doing the dream?
SubhanAllah. Okay. Dreaming mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
My question was going to ask you, Brother Jamal, how
Yeah.
can you prove we are not here?
How can I prove we're not here?
Yeah.
I can't prove it, brother. I can't.
Yeah.
This is what
So
the
this is
agnostic will say. Well, I can't really prove that we're not here,
Yeah.
but you can't prove that we are here. So who knows where we really are? So this is the point. So we don't know. Let's not think about it. Let's just enjoy life, and let's not ask deeper questions because they just give us a headache.
Yeah.
You see. So let's not bother thinking about
Those things.
what is this creator. Why am I actually in this life? I can just say it's a dream. It doesn't matter. So just do whatever I want, isn't it? I can enjoy myself. Don't need to think. And this type of behavior and thinking. This is why so many people, they don't want to get into this question because they have something that makes them avoid the question. It's like when you have a child, you know, sometimes you have a child who is convinced there's a big scary monster in the cupboard, isn't it? You've got the they've got the cupboard, the wardrobe, there's an 8-foot monster in the wardrobe with big teeth. Yeah? Now what do to protect themselves? They put the sheet over their head and they feel, I feel safe now. If there's an 8-foot monster in the cupboard with big teeth, how is this little sheet going to help you? It's not going to protect you, isn't it? If there was really a monster. But for the child, it makes the feeling of security, makes them feel comfortable, even though it's not a rational answer. And likewise, if I say, well, I don't really know whether there's a world or a universe, if I don't know, then I don't need to think about it. It's the same way. I don't need to ponder what is my life about. I don't need to ask uncomfortable questions. Do I need to change the way I'm living my life? Do I need to move on? Do I need to take a different path? I can ignore all of those questions. But I say, who really knows anyway? You see, so it's very useful for people to use this type of argument. Philosophers, but also ordinary people will use this to say, well, I don't know, who cares, really doesn't matter. So, I think,
I mean, if someone says that, if you can't prove that you're there or it's a dream,
yeah.
It doesn't really matter because you're there. You are somewhere. You're either in the dream or you're here, real.
Yeah.
You are there. You're somewhere.
That's right.
So even if you're a dream, even if this is a dream, you're there. In the dream.
Exactly.
So
get on with
even
it.
in the dream,
Even in the dream, get on with what makes sense, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a very important. I'll put these points. Some very good answers there. So let me put it, get on. I'll put that as get on with it. Yeah. Effectively. Yeah. So if you're in a dream, just live as you would normally until you've got proof of something else. So these are very good answers. I think some points are more strong than others here. Yeah. So I'll just highlight the most important point. Well, no, I'll work in reverse order. I think this is a very important issue here. Senses, and effectively this is the same point, common consensus. These kind of relate back to the same thing, which is when we talk about all of this issue of mystery, is life here, is life there, we all know common sense, the main point here really, that we here, I'm in this room. The only reason someone is coming up with a discussion, am I really in the room, is because they know I'm in the room. You would only say that, are we really in this room? If you already know and I know, we're here, we're in the room. So it's obvious, and this is a very important point. I think there's obviously evidence, this is a kind of evidence, but basic and deeper. Because if you remember when you're in a dream, you don't smell like you smell when you're awake. You don't hear sounds the way you do when you're awake. You have like just a fuzzy image. In your dream it looks real, but as soon as you wake up, you know it's not real. Yeah? So you have this basic sensation in your dream, but you have a deeper sensation when you're awake. It's much more, I can hear the sound of the chair and think about it, but I can still hear the sound of that boiler or whatever that noise is in the background. I can still see the colours of the shirts and the words and the writing and so on. So these are differences between being in a dream and being in the real world. Yeah? So we generally don't have confusion about whether we're in a dream or whether we're in the real world. But for the sake of argument, at the point that Numan, obviously, is here, sorry, and brother at the back here.
Barbara.
Barbara. Made a very important point. Just get on with it. Even if you're in a dream, what would you do if a lion is coming to attack you? In your dream, you think, a lion is coming to attack me, and you run away, isn't it? Or you try and hide. Because in your dream, as much as you think you're alive and awake, you take the rational course of action in that environment, and then when you wake up, you realize, oh, it was only a dream. Isn't it? How many times were you in a situation in your dream that you were doing everything you could to escape some danger, and then that was it, you get eaten up, or you fall off the building, or you're under the car, and then you wake up and you're like, oh, it's fun. Yeah? But what were you doing before then? Before then, even in your dream, you were trying to do everything rationally possible to avoid that danger, to not fall off the cliff. All of these things. So even if we don't really know we're awake or what have you, what is the first thing we should do? We should actually try and base our actions on what's the most sensible thing to do. What does the evidence tell us? And it's only when we get new evidence that says what you believed before was wrong, that's when you say, okay, I'll change my course of action. Because that's the common sense we apply to everything in life. If you're going to buy a car, for example, you're going to buy some furniture, what have you, you go to 3 shops and you're about to buy that product, then you find out there's another place where you can get the same thing for a cheaper price. What do? You say, right, I'll go to the other place. Until you knew that, you had what? You had previous information, i.e., you'd been to one shop, you'd been to a second, to a third, you'd found what you thought was the cheapest price. Yeah? So based on the evidence you had, you made a decision based on evidence. You didn't say, well, maybe there's another shop that's cheaper, so I won't buy it. Well, after you go to the 4th shop, oh, it is cheaper here. But maybe there's a 5th shop, so I still won't buy it. If we did that for every decision, you would never do anything in your life, isn't it? If you assume that the evidence is always against what I see in my world around me, you would never do anything. Yeah? So, as a simple example, someone may say to you, who knows what's really here, who knows what's really there? Say to that person, okay, open your wallet, give me all the money in your wallet. Just because you don't know whether the money is there to begin with. You don't even know, it may not be a wallet, it may actually be a snake in your pocket. So I'll be doing you a favor. You see? So the reality of the world is, common sense is the best approach for us to take. And people sometimes ask, what if questions? Yeah, sometimes, what if we're in a dream? What if science is going to come up? All sorts of things. Maybe in the future, people won't believe what we believe now. Maybe in the future, possibly, they will find out there's some other answer to man-life universe, and that will solve all of it. But it's all based on this phrase. Where's my pen? Oh, there it is. Yeah? It's always based on this phrase, which is, what if? Yeah? And what we call what if questions, this is something which we will always say, look, let's talk about reality, let's talk about common sense in the world around us, and make that the basis for the discussion. Because when you make it too philosophical, too hypothetical, it's easy to come up with lots of scenarios that are not true. Yeah? So if I have thought about all the possible dangers before I leave my house, all the possible things that could have happened before I arrived here, I would never leave the house, isn't it?
It's down to choice, isn't it, at the end of the
Yeah.
day? Because obviously, Father Adam, he had a choice of to do what he did or not. Because human beings have a choice,
Yeah.
whether they're left or right.
Yeah.
I think pretty much, we all have a choice on there. The fact
Exactly.
that we choose to come here, makes us stronger that we are here.
That's right.
We're not in a dream. So.
Exactly. But what we did is we made a choice based on what we observed. Not things we imagined, but what you observe and what you understand around the world, about the world around you. That's the most sound basis for humans to make a decision. If we start saying we won't decide based on what the evidence is, then we will never make any rational decision about anything. So when people start saying, what if, what if, what if, what if, we know that they're trying to make the discussion not based on observed reality. Sorry, brother.
So,
Sorry.
I don't know, someone asked me, it came to a point where I realized even I cannot answer your questions. I cannot prove there is a God, but I just believe. So I think at times even you don't have that information, but that above those reasons, there's your belief. You say, I just believe in it. That's it. Now tomorrow new information comes in, somebody comes and proves something different. You're not going to change that. You see what I mean?
I understand what you mean.
So
It's kashif, isn't it? I think the key point is kashif. We will always have that firm iman. Someone will always come up with a tricky question that may throw you off here or there. But what I would say, the basic belief we have, the firm belief we have, is that Islam is also, it's the truth that can be proven. So it won't be the case something will come which contradicts the belief. It may contradict our level of knowledge temporarily, but it won't, in the final analysis, after we studied the issue or looked into that point, it will not be something that we can't actually deal with. But the first point I would say is, this is perhaps going to deal with 50% of the issues people will raise. Because if someone's raising or throwing something that you never heard before, the first question we're going to ask, is this a what-if question? Are they talking about something that doesn't actually exist now? Something that they're assuming, something that they're trying to ask me to prove, which doesn't actually exist? If it's a what-if question like that, we say, look, let's start off with common sense discussion. We base it on what we've observed, what we know about the world, not what we're trying to hypothesize. And if we look at what we know about the world, we know the world is a rational place. It's an incredibly rational place. You study it, the laws, all of these things indicate what is deeply embedded with rational conclusions about why it's here. And it all points. I'm not going to get into that too much because it will deal with our second part of the discussion. But basically, the world is rational. I think we've got a super bonus answer here as well. So I'll just touch on this point, a very good point. But generally, our first point is, let's make sure it's always common sense, and let's not get dragged into what-if scenarios. So when we're dealing with people discussing, always say to them, let's talk about the world and as we know it. What we know about this world, that is limited and so on. And we'll go into those points later on. The super bonus answer is this point here about the dreaming mind. Because, and this one I'm just mentioning, it's a very important, or it's a very interesting discussion, but maybe not something we'll go into everybody. But even if we acknowledge that we're in a dream, it still means that there is a rational mind to dream. This is what in Western circles they talk about, I think, therefore I am. So even if one says, but what if I'm really being deceived? Everything I'm imagining will say, it's all in a computer, like they talk about the Matrix. What if I'm really in the Matrix? The fact is, all of this means there must be a mind. Even for someone to try and deceive your mind, it means there is a mind to think. There is a mind to make conclusions. There is a mind at the very basic level. Once you're aware of the world, however that world is made up, you have the ability to think. You have the ability to make conclusions about the world. So just, as we said, get on with it. Just think about the world. How could it have possibly come about? So I think that's a very important point. I think most people perhaps will struggle to understand this one. So the main point for us to focus on is common sense. Let's make sure it's common sense, what we know about the world around us. So now I've said that, I'm going to raise the second question for us to discuss, which may be a bit tougher because it kind of goes against what we've just discussed now. So a lot of people, they believe in science. They think that obviously we're in a very, and there's no denying, we're in a scientifically advanced society. They've moved a lot in terms of science. We as Muslims, one time we were the ones who were leading in science, and we were doing it in harmony with our aqidah as well, in harmony with our belief. In fact, it was our belief in Islam which was pushing us into science and discovery and new knowledge and so on. Today, people have got that scientific discovery and advancement, but they have at the same time the belief that science is replacing religion and belief. So rather than the two being working in harmony, they are being treated as opposites. They're treated as competitors. They're competing with each other instead of one scientific knowledge actually being based on the other belief. Yeah, well, I'll come back to that, but it should be based on belief in a creator. It's very much linked to belief in a creator. But nevertheless, I'll ask another question for you brothers to work in your two groups on, which is around this question about science. So people will say, look, I just deal with what I can observe in terms of scientific observation. And they may say, that's common sense. Yeah? So we need to show what's the difference between the two. Yeah? So they'll say, look, if I want to understand what temperature water will boil at, I have to conduct a scientific experiment to come to a conclusion. If I want to understand why do plants grow in summer and they die off in autumn, yeah, and then they grow again in spring, I do what? I study a scientific experiment. Yeah? If I want to come to a conclusion about the creator, I can't do a scientific experiment. I can't prove scientifically that a creator exists, because it's not in the world, it's not material, we can't see him. We don't hear directly from the creator, his voice calling to us. We don't have any physical, existence of the creator through any of the senses that we could use. Yeah? So if someone would bring this argument and say, we should only talk about things which we can materially observe. Yeah? Material in the world. These are the only relevant discussions, material. Yeah? So what's called materialism or madiyya, or different ways it's referred to. So this idea, people have said, we don't need to think about God in the same way, and I've said this in A'udhu Billah, in the same way that we don't think about fairies or spirits or other of these type of things, because we can't observe them. Yeah? So let's only deal with what we can observe. Yeah? So how would we tackle that question? I'll ask you again to go back. Is everyone happy with that question? I think it's a bit more straightforward than the first one. Yeah? So science basically deals with material. Yeah? So only material. So let me think how to phrase this question. Okay, I'm going to write quite a long question, but I think hopefully it's clear. If the creator is not material, how can we believe in him? Okay, is that clear for everybody what the question is then? So it needs to be, we believe in a creator, should be something physical, material, something we can see for us to really believe in it. So another 10 minutes inshallah, we'll go through that. I think we will...
Yeah, but if we
DNA comes from the mother chicken. So obviously the DNA is embedded in the chicken
It's created. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I'm not Muslim. You're a non-Muslim. And then you're just going around.
Material things. So what were the responses? I think I'll come back to this group. So that's said, if you can let us know what your thoughts are and we'll come to you.
You can't say you created yourself. My colleague will.
So I'm saying there has to be something beyond material to create material. So the creator, this has to. So if you're saying this is created, there has to be something above it. So your creator has to be non-material, has no dimension or no shape. If you know what I mean.
And to that, like we link that to what's revealed to us. Like Allah says that He's not part of the creation, so it links in kind of with what we believe as well.
Okay.
And then there was the logic argument, which was the great grandfather one.
You claim your great-grandparents.
Yeah.
Sorry? Great-grandparents?
Change
the example of the
the way I see it, you don't have to see it to believe it. So we're saying, and then it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just because you can't see it, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So just saying that our great-great-great-grandfather, there was a great-great-great-grandfather, but we've never seen it.
Okay.
So, but we still believe that there was.
Why?
Because then how am I here?
Your grandfather was the father of someone, and your mother is or father come to that chain, isn't it? So there's scientific proof, isn't it?
When you're buried, you'd be decayed into it. You wouldn't.
So it was a material, it was a
measure
physical
the idea.
human being.
That's not under history.
Well, I'm saying you can't measure it.
history.
This is journal.
History can change, and history has different opinions as well. So you don't know what is correct unless you separate the fact from the fiction.
Yeah, but I was saying that when you're buried, you decay into it. So you can't actually physically, materially say that was my great grandfather. It looks just like any ordinary soil. You still believe in you had a great grandfather because you can't be here without it.
The points come from different angles to what we need, in a way. Yes.
Okay, I'll put guidance here. I'm not sure I get that one.
Yeah.
So I'll just put guidance.
I think what he was trying to say was when you have a creator, if
Yeah.
he sent some, because you can't, let's say you can't measure the creator,
Yeah.
but if he sent something that you couldn't explain but you could measure,
Yeah.
then you'd have to believe in the creator. Like I was saying, the Quran maybe, that's physical, you can physically pick up a Quran.
Right, I
So
see.
if you say accept that as a miracle, then you'd have to indirectly say there's a creator.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll come to this group's answers as well.
Okay, basically, the science, what they did was they took a sheep, they took its DNA and they cloned it. So basically, our argument is they used a tangible product, a material that was already in existence to create an exact duplicate of that. But they did not take nothing out of nothing to create a certain product. So what we believe is like, just because an animal was to walk across a certain path and we don't see the animal, we can still see the droppings of the animal, we still see the footprints of an animal, so we know it comes into existence. So although it's not part of his creation, but we know there is a creator, let's just say God, because of all the properties like us, the trees, the sun, space, gravity, and all the other properties that science mentions, which are all proofs in the Quran itself.
Right, I see. Any other points you want to add? Any other things? Or maybe you want to question about each other's answers?
The other thing was like kind of the Big Bang Theory that a lot of people talk about and say, oh, that there's kind of a Big Bang Theory and this is how we were created. And sometimes, from my understanding, I would say, okay, then how can all of us have two eyes and one nose, and a mouth? And why, can't Farhan have 5 eyes and I have 3 eyes? Because it was a big bang, it was just be all
chaotic.
random.
Right.
But they just doesn't feel.
This is more of a. To me, this is like a spiritual question. For example, we don't know what we're going to do in 5 minutes or what we're going to say in 5 minutes. We don't know when we're going to die, sort of thing. I'm just looking at it from that. Everything ahead of us is, I don't know if you can call it materialistic or not, but I'm trying to sum it up in a few words, but we don't know what's coming ahead.
Yeah.
So, our Creator does know, for example.
So knowledge of the Creator.
Yeah.
How do you feel that deals with this question?
I think if we agree that we can see the creation, so there must be a creator, obviously.
But like, for example,
must have created it. Yeah.
But then he's also in charge of his creation, and he knows where it's going. So he knows exactly, as you say, it goes back to our starting point, our end point, and all of the things that we're going to achieve in our life. It's linked back to the Creator because we are part of creation.
If the Earth was 1 degree to the left or right, everything would just fall down. Basically, it would,
life wouldn't be sustainable.
Well, you look at the sun, it's a star. No sun, all life is there. The moon goes, we'll have no gravity pretty much.
and everybody's coming to a conclusion that you're going to die. Like I was looking at someone that was talking before Prophet Muhammad came, came and he said, "Man aasha mat," whoever lives dies, and woman mata fat. وكل ما هو آت آت. So you just think, you know, like we know we're going to die, and okay, if you can scientifically make that material like us exist forever, then you know try it. And nobody, I think nobody has ever lived forever. So
but the science is not perfect. I mean, they contradict in themselves. There's a theory.
Science is limited.
Science is
limited.
It's a hypothetical. It's this discovery, isn't it? By trial and error to prove answers. The key point here is obviously you've given lots of good answers here. I think the key point you've identified is that it's not about trying to prove that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is material. Yeah, Allah created the material, but He's not going to be subject to experiment or testing or being put in, in some sort of accelerator or particle accelerator or any of these things. Yeah, it's not creation, not subject to creation. But the key point is, what are we saying? Anything that we can't see or test, we can't believe in it. That's the fundamental issue, isn't it? That, as it says, if the Creator is not material, how can we believe in it? But obviously, there are many things we don't materially see, but we still believe in it because we have evidence from the material world, what we observe. So I think the simple example, the great-great-grandfather example, it's a very obvious point. We all believe we have ancestors, even though we haven't scientifically observed that we have ancestors. We make a conclusion that human beings, we've observed in the reality, a parent has children. Yeah, we've seen that. We've seen our own parents, we've seen our own children in some cases, we see from our relatives. So we can infer from that process that that is how we are here, that's where our ancestors have gone. They may not be present, but rationally we can conclude from the material that we observe, we can conclude that some immaterial things, some things that we can't see right now, must exist. To explain the world as it is today, we make conclusions about the past. Like you mentioned, history. History is about events that took place in the past. Some things we observe about the past, they're physical, like fossils for example. We can observe sea creatures existed. We may find a fossil halfway up a mountain. That tells us that what? There was a sea in that place at one time. Why do we make that observation? Not because we say, okay, let's get in a time machine, we'll go back and we'll see the sea that was there. We observe the material world as it is now. We make conclusions about things that are not there. A very simple example. When I was studying, I was sharing a flat with some other brothers. I put the kettle on, I went to my room, I had to pray. So these brothers, they came in, and they were wondering, is anyone else in the house? And I'm praying, so I couldn't answer when they came in. But they saw that the kettle was boiled. So they obviously can conclude, oh, someone else must be in the house, because the kettle was just boiled. You see? So they didn't see me, didn't hear me, didn't speak to me, but they could conclude that I was someone. You don't know all the details of the person, but they could conclude someone was in the house, because why? They could see the effects in the reality. So the point is, we observe, like the example of the animal. This is a famous example, Imam Shafi'i actually used this example, that we can see the effect of the camel. We don't see the camel, but we see its footprints, we see the dropping, the dung on the path. We know that that animal was in that area without seeing it. So obviously it's not the nicest example to give when we're talking about the creator, but let's talk about Mona Lisa. That's nice. The painting is a nicer example. Yeah, so we observe the painting, it tells us there was a painter. So likewise, we observe the created world, we can make conclusion about the created world, and conclude from that there is a creator. Yeah, so that's helps us deal with the two big approaches that we will find in our discussions. One, people will throw what if questions at us. What if? We don't know. We could be, the world could be in this way, it could be that. What do we really know? So there's the what if question, and there is the material approach. Science and materialism. matter is all that matters. Yeah? So these are the two approaches that we find are most dominant amongst the way that people think that we'll interact with. So what we'll do now, last exercise, will be just for us to summarize in our groups what we believe our answer is to this question. How do we show, based on common sense, yeah, not what if, and based on concluding about material, not saying I can only judge material, but concluding what we observe about material, how can we conclude that there is a creator? Yeah, because we've said here, our answer here is basically that we can make judgments based on observing the material world. Yeah, so the same way I can observe the world and say, I have great-grandparents, or you have great-grandparents, I observe the reality, then I make a conclusion about something that's not present in the world right now. That grandparent, that great-grandparent. The same with, as we said, the example of the painting. Yeah? Observe something material, conclude about something that is not present, is not material. So bearing these 2 points in mind, I want both groups to summarize where the argument will be. However, I believe, Yahya, we've got the food now, yeah? So what we'll do is we'll take a short break. You'll probably discuss over the food as well. We'll just bring the things in for us to kind of eat, and it may help the discussion. It may also help the energy levels as well, inshallah. So we'll bring that in, and then you can discuss over the food, and then I guess around 20 or 25 minutes from now, we'll have both teams just give a short summary of how they would approach this question of creator, and then we'll summarize the whole event, inshallah, of a creator. So the first section we went through was to deal with this issue of those what-if type questions that people would ask. So we don't want to get involved in what-if questions. We want to make the argument revolve around the use of common sense. Yeah? Common sense arguments about the world as it is, not some kind of hypothetical world. The other point is that we said we don't want to get sidetracked by materialism as well. The idea that we can only give an explanation about the world that's in the world, things that are in the world. So we gave examples such as great-grandparents, the example of the Mona Lisa, the painting of the painter. So we want to present an argument that's built on common sense and makes conclusions or makes inferences around the things that we can observe. So when we're engaging with people, we're actually presenting them things that they can see and sense for themselves, they can judge for themselves. So I'll ask you if you can take 5 minutes or so just to talk amongst your teams. I think you've got part of the way there anyway through the last discussion. Just to have another summary of how you believe you would tackle this question and present your argument step by step, inshallah. I'm only looking for a short presentation, maybe if you can say just in 5 or 10 minutes at most. And it's not about how eloquent or the wording and long words and what have you. Just a straightforward explanation of what you think the key points we should emphasize in this matter. Let's say 5 to 10 minutes, inshallah, just in your short groups, and then you'll present back.
What was the question, Brother Jamal? I think, how do you know that we are here? So we have to make like positive, logical science of beautiful science exists. Is created. That's what I'm saying. I'm non-Muslim. You are non-Muslim, and then just going around.
We've got 2 groups. I hope you will have one person presenting from each group. And you're not going to argue too much about who's going to present, inshallah. So I think because this group seems to have nominated Brother Mudassir to present, okay. So if I come back to Mudassir, if you want to just take us through your argument.
Okay, we'll start off with someone who's like an atheist, for example.
Yeah.
We'll say that first we're going to use logic, so that just kind of hopefully takes out all these imaginary things out of the box. Then we'll say, like, make the inference to the great-great-great-grandfather. Just because you can't see him doesn't mean you can't conclude he's not there. You can't, just because you can't observe him. Then we used the camel one, like just the footprints in the desert. They are signs that there is a creator, or there's a camel there that went that way. We used the miracles in the Qurans just to kind of explain these are some of the signs that we have to prove there is a creator.
Yeah.
And the science, like how the universe was created, it must have had something to control it and fine tune it so everything kind of came in the system. Am I right, guys?
Yeah, that's right.
And say for example, if you can't believe, if you think a mobile phone is complicated and you can't believe that was created without a creator, then we are more complicated than a mobile phone, so you know, we must have a creator as well, which is Allah.
Do you mean the human body?
Yeah.
Human beings.
And if there's a creator, obviously, he's given us
We just say same thing.
the Quran to show us how to use our body, which he's given us.
There was a lot of physics I noticed in this group, a lot of Hawking's here and there and all
I
sorts of things.
don't understand physics.
Right, okay.
Maybe one of the brothers.
We're talking about quantum physics here.
Okay, so this is the two arguments you presented there on how you would go to an atheist. So the first argument is that logically, we would say that every person is a grandfather or great-grandfather who's not present, but we infer his existence from the existence of the child. We see the camel's footprints in the desert. This is like the nicer example of the two. The footprints of the camel indicate the existence of the camel. So, in the same way, when we see, I'm not sure what miracles you're referring to here in the Quran, but when we see scientific miracles, we'll just throw that in. Yeah? Okay. So, scientific miracles, they give us an indication of the power of the Creator, and when we see the complexity and fine-tuning of the world, we conclude it didn't emerge by itself. Yeah? So this is a design argument, was usually what's called a design argument. It's an argument from the design, the fact that the world has design, that it must be the product of a designer. The second group have argued that using common sense, we see everything in the world is created, everything's dependent on, or all material things are dependent on other material things. The Creator is the exception to that because he's not dependent. Yeah? So we've got two different arguments here. This one is more what you would call, I'll call it a contingency argument. And we'll maybe go into that if we've got time. Okay, any issues anyone notices or wants to point out with any of these arguments?
I've seen some people, they mention sometimes on YouTube that the points that we mentioned, they're more coming from a creationist theory.
To some degree, yes. This is a point that some people might raise.
Yeah.
What I would say on that, let me just raise this point here, because you said that the dependency of all material things on other material things. Now, what I would say to that is, would not an atheist, you say that to, that sentence, is that not like waving a red flag at a bull? Because you're saying material
we missed
is dependent on... Sorry?
We missed out the ending, because that is really on the will of Allah. Because when I said that, I said by the will of Allah, because everything has to exist, but it's obviously through Allah's will.
Yeah.
But when we live in this world, we have to use materials of this world to exist.
Yeah. But your atheist is going to say, material, dependent on material, material explains everything.
So everything is matter.
Everything's matter. He'll say, you've just explained my point. You're telling me my beliefs.
You're on my side now.
You're on my side, yeah? You come over to my side. So, what is perhaps missing from there? Maybe I think you have the point there, but somehow you've not.
Backfired.
It kind of backfired, yeah. You pretty much like you've gone towards the guy. Somehow you've shot yourself in the foot. Sorry?
To the Venus flytrap.
Maybe, I think so. So, any ideas about how you sort this one out? This point here.
No, yes. Well, we had a discussion about that. If we go at root level, we're talking about this Big Bang theory.
Yeah.
Scientists, they say, okay, this by itself the experiment happened.
Yeah.
They all knew the chair, the table, this glass, everything, there is a creator behind it.
Yeah.
How can this big theory, a Big Bang theory, happen by itself?
Right.
There must be some creator beyond who did this.
Because?
There must be some hidden thing, we call it God, they call it God, who did this experiment. They haven't proved it yet, how this happens.
So
Big
when you
Bang.
say it's because of a creator, the question is, why is it because of a creator? Why not? It just happened. It just happened.
No, it can't be happening. Science says itself.
To understand.
It's too coincidental for it to just happen.
Yeah.
Everything in balance.
It's too ambiguous and too random. So it's a stage of sequences, and to have it in such harmony, we believe there has to be some kind of infinite creator beyond our realm, basically.
Right, you're kind of saying, I believe there's a creator. That's the reason why, isn't it? You're saying to the person, I believe it's because of a creator, and you should too. Yeah? Now, is that a convincing argument to someone else to say, I believe it, so you should believe it as well?
No.
You've got to give him more evidence, isn't it, that links one statement to another.
Everything happens because someone or some makes it happen.
Yeah.
Like a train will stand still unless someone pushes it.
Yeah.
Something has to happen. So the Big Bang or something it happens. Somebody started that.
Yeah.
So that supreme being, we call God.
Yeah.
That's simple.
Is it
Yeah.
our understanding that dependency of all material of other it's beyond our understanding?
Beyond our understanding.
We can't understand why this happened, but this is how it is.
That's just how.
But isn't that that's what the atheists would say?
But they said material, but we say beyond our understanding,
And
which
then
means there must be a creator who did that to seem to happen that way.
I think when you're saying the dependency, if something's dependent on another one,
yeah. So let me just put you on pause there for a second. So my point is, at the moment, that just says material is dependent on material. So for the atheist or the materialist, that's his self-contained argument. Is that material is dependent on material. I've got no problem with you. Let's shake hands and we go our own separate ways now. You have agreed with me. So, Burhan, you wanted
So I was
to...
saying, materials, if you keep on going on that, there has to be one first material.
Right,
So
okay.
they say that's a Big Bang.
Yeah.
So that must be dependent on something else. But because it's the first material, it can't be another material.
Right, I see.
So there has to be something above material that was dependent on it. So there has to be something above material that has no realms or no limitations to it. You know what I'm saying? That would be the God. Because
What do people think of that point that Burhan's just made then?
I agree with that.
You agree with it, yeah? Okay, so, no more.
So can you just say that again, so I can, because obviously I want to...
I was saying, if material is dependent on another material, there has to be the first material. And if you go down the line, there has to be something that was the original material, right? And then if that material, because it's the first material, has to be dependent on something else, and that's not going to be dependent on material because it's the first one, so it has to be dependent on something above material, and that's what we call a creator.
Its value has to be greater. Its value is greater than the material itself.
Yeah,
To
material
some
is
degree,
not
to some degree.
Not necessarily.
So the material has a...
Why not necessarily? No, why not?
Well, that's just it's just going back to there. Every material is dependent on another material to survive.
Yeah.
So there's no...
But someone created the material.
The very first
But
material.
what Rahman's point is first material. I think that's the key point. He said first material.
Who created it?
Yeah.
So if you can put an example like...
But he would just say it was an accident.
Say it's an accident, yeah?
Yeah, that's what they say, accident. Yeah,
Where's
that's what
the
they
first
say.
material?
Yeah.
Right.
What proof do you have?
Okay. Can I give a short summary of what I think would be the best approach? So I think you've put lots of different points together, and obviously you may find that even my explanation you want me to expand, or you may feel there's not points here, but The key points, really it comes back to, I think this point that Burhan's made about first material is very important. I think there's lots of different elements here where we've brought the thinking process together and maybe we haven't all threaded it all in one direction. Because what we're saying is that if you observe the world, let's start from the common sense observation, that everything's created, or everything out there, let's say everything has this dependency. Nothing in the universe is unlimited or all powerful or omnipotent. All things in the universe, they have dependencies and relationships with other material. So all things in the universe, they can't go beyond those limits that they have naturally, and they naturally embody. Yeah. So whether it's the temperature that water heats at, or whether it's the way that planetary bodies they move around the sun or another planetary body, all of these things they express limitations. They're all limited and dependent. That's a very important word. They're all dependent. So when we look at all things in the universe, we sum all of them together, what do we arrive at? We arrive at all of the things in the universe, they're all limited. They're all weak, they're all needy, they're all dependent on something else. Now, what do we know about the sum of all limited things? If we add everything in this room, will we come to an unlimited number of objects?
No, because they're still limited.
They're still limited. In fact, I can tell you that everything in the universe is limited. Why? Even if I can't see everything, the fact that I'm in part of the universe, and if you add all the other bits together, it naturally must all be limited. Because there's only a bit of it here. Even if I can't see, if I see a long queue at the bus stop, for example, I will never conclude maybe it's an unlimited queue. It goes on forever. Why? Because you can say it hypothetically, but in the real world, all things that you can count, you can sense, they're all limited. And when you add them all together, they will always be limited and dependent. So in this situation, how did these limited things come into being? This is the question, and we come back to this point here, the first material. If we say that everything in the universe, there's a water cycle, there's planets, they formed, the sun, the stars, they're all formed, but they were all limited. So how did these things bring themselves into existence? How did the first thing emerge? Did something come from nothing? This is the question. Yeah? Did something come from nothing? So our first view to this is, did the universe create itself? We already said the universe is limited, it's dependent. So it couldn't have created itself. And it's absurd to create itself, isn't it? You won't say, if I want to wake myself up in the morning, I'll give myself a call and tell myself to get up at 7. Isn't it? Because you don't have the power to wake yourself up before you're awake. Yeah? So the universe doesn't have the power to create if it's not in existence. Yeah? So something must have brought it into existence. Yeah? Now, would that thing be dependent, which brought this universe into being, all of the dependent things? No, because it's not part of all of those dependent things. So it can't be dependent, it will be independent. Yeah? So it must be an independent being who brought all of these things into existence. Because if we sum all of the limited things, everything we observe, put all of those limited things together, then it must be something which is unlike that group which brought them into existence. If you bring all of the limited things that we can observe all together, it must be something unlimited and independent which brought them into being. Yeah? Because they haven't existed forever, they're not eternal. Yeah? We observe they're limited, so they can't have existed eternally and never been brought into existence. They are not able to bring themselves into existence. It's absurd to say something didn't exist and then it brought itself into existence. So it must be that there's an unlimited and independent creator who brought that creation into existence. Yeah? So this is how we believe the best way to address this argument is. Because what you're doing is you're talking about the world around you, what you can observe via your common sense. So we're not getting dragged into what-if questions or weird views around material. We're talking about the world as it exists. Yeah? And we're saying the world as it exists is limited and dependent. Yeah? And therefore, for these limited dependent things to come into existence, it must be something unlimited and independent brought them into existence. Yeah? So I think this is the basic argument here, but I think there are some questions, and maybe some of the scientific arguments some of the brothers were discussing in the group, maybe we want to bring those in at this point. So I think, Yahya, you've got a point you wanted to raise with that. Does everyone understand that argument so far? Yeah? Okay, Yahya.
Yeah, I just want to say, going back to this issue of the first material thing,
yeah,
and what you're saying is it must depend on something which is immaterial.
Yeah.
But what if someone was to say it was the first thing was dependent on another material thing, and that was dependent on another material thing, and that was dependent, and it goes on forever into the past.
Yeah.
It's called infinite regression.
Yeah.
Because sometimes some atheists say that.
Yeah.
That eternity is an eternal chain behind us before this moment. So, how would you come back at that point?
Yeah, and obviously some atheists, they used to argue, obviously before some material evidence emerged for the Big Bang theories, there were a lot of atheists, most scientists actually were arguing the universe was infinite anyway. That was their view, that the universe is, it's infinite and it's expanding on an infinite basis. So, they had a steady state model that the universe had always been in the same way that it was, basically. So it's infinite in terms of time. Now, if we look at this approach, we want to tackle whether you can have an actual infinite, an actually unlimited number of limited things. That's the key question. Yeah. So someone can say there's infinite. We have the number. We have numbers which are called infinite numbers. Yeah. So you have infinity. You have different forms of infinity in terms of from a mathematical point of view. You have some infinites which are larger than other infinites. Yeah. But that's all in terms of maths and numbers. In the real world, can you have a real existing infinite number of limited things? And that's where you find it's not possible to say the universe is composed of a series of an unlimited series of events, an infinite number of events. Yeah, and we can look at that if we give an analogy. One good example, one good analogy is if you look at a marksman, or a sniper who has got to fire at a particular target. Yeah? So he's got to fire at the target, but before he can fire, he's got to wait for the order from his sergeant. And before the sergeant can give the order to fire, he has to receive the okay from the major. Before the major can fire, he needs to receive the order from the lieutenant, and so on, to the colonel, to the general, and so on. Now, if we imagine that is an unlimited number of people that soldier has to wait for before he can pull the trigger, if that infinite number of people has to say yes, will he ever get to fire the trigger? Because it's an unlimited, it's not got a beginning, there's no end to that number of people who are going to be giving the okay, signing the forms, what have you, stamping the, okay, pass it on. If that is going to take an infinite number of events to happen, you will never get to the point at which a soldier will fire. Yeah? It's the same, for example, if you've got a book in a library that you want to borrow, and there are 3 people who have put their name down to borrow it before you. You know it's going to take weeks before you get the book. What happens if there's an infinite number of people who have to borrow the book before you get to see it? Yeah? You will never get the book, isn't it? Because it's going to take infinite sequence. It will never reach your point. Yeah? So likewise, the universe, as we exist now, it cannot be that we're at the end of an infinite series of events. Because it's got no beginning, it's got no end point. It's never going to reach this state that we're in now. So if the universe had begun an infinite period of time ago, it will never reach to where we are here. You see, it must be a finite series. You see, the same way, for example, that when we look at the finite, the infinite, even if we look from the point of view from the finite to the infinite. Yeah? So looking at the limited world around us, if we add every object in the world, every atom, every subatomic particle, you add all of them and sum them, you're never going to reach a point at which you reach infinity. Because it's not like numbers. Infinity is not a number where you say 1 million, 1 billion, 1 trillion, 1 trillion and 1, 1 trillion 2, oh, infinity. Isn't it? Because you take that 1 off, you suddenly become finite again. Yeah, so you can never go from finite to infinite. Yeah? Because as long as you've got finite things and you bring them together, it will always be the sum of the limited. Finite things is always finite and limited. So the universe as we exist cannot have existed for an infinite number of times, an infinite number of events, because each one of those events added to another event, will always be a limited amount of events. And that means the universe must have begun at some particular point. It must have started with one initial event before which there were no events. I think I wanted to come to one of the points the act was raising in the group. Maybe you want to comment at some point, but I'll just take these 2 points and I'll come to you on that. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, I was saying stuff. Some people say that parallel universes, and what Yahya was saying. So you have the Big Bang.
Yeah.
And that, and then some of that cuts off and creates another Big Bang, and then that cuts off, and then yeah, so it infinitely happens through that.
What do we think about that argument? What type of argument is that? Maybe there's a parallel universe where, because obviously, like I think one of the discussions we mentioned, every time a particular object takes a particular path in this world, one of the ideas that scientists has is the equal probabilities of it going one direction or another. And one of the ways they say it's resolved is, there's no creator. They say, just another universe is created for the other probability. So in the universe where I put the chair like this and it falls down this way, this is the universe we're in now, but actually there's another universe where the chair fell the other way. You see? So there's actually an unlimited number of universes because all of these random events where there's different probabilities, each one creates its own universe. Yeah? So how would we tackle that? I think we should know because we talked about what type of discussions we will accept.
Talk about general common sense thing, isn't it?
It's common sense and it's what if?
Yeah.
What if there's another
trap of what if?
What if there's another parallel universe where we don't have to answer your question?
Yeah.
You see, that's basically what when they're saying that to you, what if, it's actually another universe, there's a multiverse, there's an unlimited number of universes for every possible point of view or issue. Sorry.
It doesn't really matter how many parallel universe or we started from somewhere.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. Even if we assume that, because it is still a what if. So we say, well look, you're bringing something, you're telling me about parallel universe where you have no way of knowing that it exists anyway. So you're bringing a what if question. It's irrational. But even if you said that the universe has some way of creating other worlds, it's still part of this universe. Something about this universe has this capability. Let's talk about what's the origin of the universe. Is it the origin itself? Did the universe create itself? Or did something else create it? Even if it has this ability to create other universes, it still would be something that had been created and it had been embodied with this capability. And that means there must be some creator who put that attribute and put that ability within it. But it's still, to be honest, it's still very much a what if question. Yeah? That what if there's a parallel? We have no real way of knowing or verifying that there are parallel universes. So to discuss around that is actually self-defeating. Even from a scientific point of view, because the scientist who says parallel universes would also say, I only deal with material questions. I'm only interested in material, I'm only interested in things I can test. So how can you test a parallel universe? As soon as you try and test it, you're going to create another parallel universe, isn't it? So it never actually would come to a point where it's a reasonable, sensible discussion around something that we can't see, we can't sense, we can't touch, we can't make any conclusions about.
But if someone says like the universe came from nothing by itself, it gave birth to itself, surely we could say, can your mother give birth to herself? She couldn't. So something could have created itself. So therefore, if your mother can't give birth to herself, how can the universe have created itself, right?
Exactly, yeah. Because obviously it's about being dependent. So we say the universe, everything we observe, has dependencies on things that we observe around it. Yeah. So to say the universe created itself means it has an ability that it didn't have, and it used that ability to create itself. Yeah. So you can't have a universe which has the capability to create itself when it doesn't exist. Yeah? So it's like, for example, saying that, one of us here saying that, oh well, I got a lift here, it was my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson who drove me down. It's a very kind boy. Yeah? But he's not here, he doesn't exist. We can't attribute actions to something which isn't present. So likewise, we can't the other way say the world created itself before the world existed. You see? So again, I believe as long as we keep these points in mind, what if, and the issue of material arguments, we'll always be able to deal with it. Because we say, whatever you talk about in the material world, we are making rational conclusions about what we observe. And the rational conclusion is that the limited dependent world that we observe is the creation of an unlimited and independent creator. So even a space we say is a vacuum is actually created because it's still subject to certain laws that we've discovered. You see, humans have discovered, but what we've seen is basically these are limitations which even empty space is affected by. So nothing that we see is independent and unlimited. You see, all of these things that we observe in the world around us are limited and dependent. So our argument basically is that we've observed the material world and we've made a conclusion. The same way we talk about great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather, the same way we talked about the Mona Lisa, the same way we talked about the footprints in the desert. These are all material things we've observed. We said that all of these material things, the sum of them is limited and dependent. And they could not have brought themselves into existence. And therefore they needed something unlimited and independent to explain why they're here. Because they could not bring themselves into being. It must be that unlimited independent creator, whom we call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who brought them into being. So I believe this is a very powerful argument. We've all contributed to this discussion, which is good. All of us have contributed ideas and examples for how we can illustrate this, which shows that from a common sense point of view, we as Muslims can interact and discuss with anybody as long as we get them to stick to, not using what if, just use common sense, and acknowledging that when we look at the material world, we can make inference, we can make conclusions about that world. From that, we can build a very powerful discussion about the rational belief in a creator. It's not emotional. We're not telling them, you should believe because I believe. Yeah, we're not saying you should believe because my grandparents believe. Yeah, that's my culture, should be your culture. Yeah, we're actually giving them grounded argument, strong argument to follow and believe in Islam, inshallah. So, sorry, we'll just take this last question. I think we'll take a couple of minutes. We're going to finish now because we're very close to the end. But
I think it must be quite helpful in talks like that if we have a friend who is atheist and bring him along, and because they could ask questions that we never think of. Maybe.
That's right, that's right. I mean, that, to be honest, is a next step that I was going to say, is that what we should do, the next session will take place in 2 weeks' time, inshallah, which will be the 12th of May? Yeah.
Yes.
Yahya will let you know the date of the next event. That will be about proof of Quran. So inshallah, another presenter will be coming. I think it will be Muhammad Omar coming to present. He will be talking about how we prove that the Quran is a miracle. So I did notice in some of our discussions, we were saying that the Quran says this, the Quran says that. Obviously for the non-Muslim, he doesn't accept the Quran as an authority on anything, necessarily. So now we've said that there's a creator, the next discussion we want to say is why we can prove the Quran is a miracle, even for the person who doesn't understand Arabic. That's the first question. Yeah? So we can show it's a miracle for anybody who understands or has insight and will listen to our discussion. It will be built on what we're talking about today. But what I would say, so if you come inshallah in 2 weeks' time, the brother, Dr. Muhammad Omar, he will be talking about the miracle of the Quran, inshallah, how we can prove that to Muslim and the non-Muslim. What we would also suggest, and what I would suggest is, try as much as possible to get into discussions, and maybe set a target for yourself, have 1, 2 or 3 discussions with non-Muslims around today's topic. Yeah? I think ideally, at some point in time, what we want to do is once we finish the workshops, we would like to do, I think the idea is to do some sort of event where you invite non-Muslims down, so we get to effectively try out all of the things we've learned and all the things we've understood through the discussion. We road test it. Yeah? So that will be a chance for us to cover a lot of these topics. But I would suggest, ideally, particularly for those of you who have participated in today's session, try and, for those non-Muslims you've discussed with before, try and take this discussion to them. Because obviously when you come back in 2 weeks' time, you will discuss with the other presenter. He will be able to address some of maybe some points that I didn't cover properly today, or some new issues that came out through your discussion. I think it will be very beneficial to have that discussion. Does that answer the question? I hope that answered the actual...
Yeah, no, that's just...
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I know what you said. It's a very large question. Once I
Yeah,
had a similar...
Sorry.
No, sorry, I was talking about these sessions, bringing
Yeah.
someone, maybe just
some friend if he's willing to come along.
What I would say, the only thing I would say there is that because this is kind of like a training session, for yourself, so I would say focus on for yourself, trying to get all of those answers and get those arguments as clear as possible. But maybe if you want, I think Brother Yahya, some of the other brothers, obviously Brother Yahya himself is he's come to Islam through his own thinking and discussion he had with brothers many years ago. So maybe let him know if you've got people you want him to go out to discuss with alongside you, he'll be able to do that, or he'll be able to arrange for someone else to join you in that discussion. Because obviously you're saying let's practically put that into practice. And I think let's do that outside the session. In the session we try and get some of the questions ourselves, clear in our own mind, then we try that out with other people. If that makes
And
sense.
secondly, if you would have come in this session, you're gonna laugh probably on us.
Yeah. That is a bit of
They're themselves not sure about that. So how can they convince this?
Because we don't want to embarrass ourselves as well, yeah? Inshallah. So sorry,
very last.
Yeah.
He created everything. Then why red? Why bad things in the world? Why that thing in the world? Why did he decide an 8-year-old have an accident and die?
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a question. Unfortunately, I didn't have a answer. So
I think on this point, why is it they're suffering in the world? I think there's quite a few different ways to tackle that question. The first thing to realise is that when someone's asking that question, they've kind of acknowledged there is a creator. And you need to sometimes emphasize, so you kind of know there's a creator, but you have something you don't understand about the creator.
Yeah.
So it's good to make someone actually realize the only reason they're saying that is they're trying to find a loophole to avoid the belief that they're starting to feel, that there is a creator. Now, in terms of the actual question of belief and evil, the fact is evil things do happen in the world. From the text, because this is the question, why is the creator allowed this to happen? Yeah? For us to answer it, we can't say why Allah did this, why Allah did that. And that's why the next session is, well, He's given us answers. He's told us that life is a test. Yeah? He's told us that there will be difficulties and hardships in life, and there will be ease as well. And that this life is only temporary. Now, I believe that as a Muslim, you should believe it too. You may have difficulty, but we've got a message from the Creator that proves and answers this point. You see, so the next point is, we've got the Risala, isn't it? We've got a message which actually answers why is there suffering, why is there pain, and therefore we should engage them in that discussion. The other point as well, which is not as, it doesn't really lead in the right direction, but at the same time, this kind of addresses this point, is that fundamentally we won't say that there isn't a creator because some of his actions are beyond our comprehension. Isn't it? Yeah? So there's some things that the creator does or is enabled in the world. We don't understand why, but we have understood that it's the action of a creator. And therefore, are we in a position to say, well, I look at the actions of the creator and I judge him, he is not as morally sound as I am. I'm morally superior to the creator. It doesn't make sense to make this conclusion. Because even amongst human beings, if we look at a doctor, he may operate on a young child, doesn't he? Or give an injection, which is a life-saving injection. If you ask the 2-year-old child, what do you think of the doctor? They say, bad man, made my arm hurt, isn't it? So there may be some hidden benefit which the child doesn't realize, but all they can talk about is their own understanding of the world. So likewise, with these things that we see, very painful, very sad things that happen, children dying and so on, we don't understand why this has happened, but we know there's a reason that the Creator must have for it. We can't disclose it by our own intellect. You see? So I think this is how I would tackle it. And a very last possible argument I would say is that sometimes people will use this argument that when a child gets smacked by their parent, it's painful, but they don't say, my mother doesn't exist. Isn't it? The mother has done something disliked by the child, they don't find it beneficial, but they don't say, because they don't like what they did, they don't exist. So likewise, how can we say, I don't like what the Creator did, so there's no Creator? It doesn't make sense. You've acknowledged there is a Creator, so it doesn't make sense to you. But what we should really try and do is get into the discussion, is there some message from the Creator that will answer our questions? and obviously try and get into a discussion about the proof of Quran, inshallah. So I think that's how we'll tackle that question. Do need to finish here, inshallah, because we're kind of overrunning for time. Jazakallah khair for your participation in the session. It's been very good, very useful. What I would say, sorry, is there any final messages you want me to?
No, just if you finish up, and this brother wanted to make a quick announcement about something, an event happening in Camberley, inshallah.
Okay, I think if you just make that
Yeah,
announcement.
it's all about Brother Baba and his friends. We're organising an exhibition in Camberley. The main focus to invite the non-Muslim. It's more like exhibition and galleries and calligraphy and other things. It's called Discover Islam, sometime in June. If you come, that would be great. And other people who've got knowledge and non-Muslims will come, so you can talk to them.
Inshallah, very good, very good. So we'll finish there, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for that announcement. Obviously, 2 weeks' time, Brother Yahya, please make sure if you don't have his details already, you're in touch with him. And what we will do, the next session will be about proof of Quran. We'll finish there. If I can ask, the Sahaba, they used to give each other a reminder whenever they would separate from each other. They would recite Surah Al-Asr as a reminder about life and the objective of life, inshallah. So rather than making a dua, if we can finish just reciting together, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.